Today's training is on building a form. We're going to use a relatively simple form. As we've said in prior trainings, you're unlikely to create a form from scratch, but it is very possible that you will take a form that you've already have and clone it and repurpose it. So we're going to walk through that process today. I'm going to walk through all the different fields that are available to you. So right now we're on the forms list page, and I've already picked out a form that I'd like to use. I was searching for a template. I'm going to go over here to the arrow down, and I'm going to say clone. The first thing I'd recommend doing once you've cloned is go into properties and rename your clone, right? And until we've saved this copy, notice that these options over here on the left-hand side are actually grayed out, right? It's not going to actually let me go in and make changes for something like the connectors or the processing. I'm going to go donation template, and I'm just going to go ahead and say this is a copy. And once I save it, notice this column to the side. It's now going to be not grayed out, but actually black. So we're going to walk through this form options, right? Starting with the left-hand column over here and working our way right. Notice we have like this summary. Actually, notice that our very first option is we can go back to that forms list. And if we did that, we would go back to the forms list. And we want to go back into our copy. We can say configure. Configure here, all those also the same options on that left-hand column. Let's just go build to go straight back to where we were. Now, the summary goes over the form processing, email notifications, the thank you page if you wanted to address that, publishing options, connectors, and e-signature. We'll have different trainings on some of these. Build is where we're going to have the majority of our lesson today. We're going to go over fields. View is important because view is going to allow you to see what the form looks like to the public. So if I click on that, this URL at the top is your form's URL. So you can copy and paste this and put it wherever you'd like, right? In your membership portal, perhaps on an external website, or send out in an email. And right now with view, I could test this. We'll have a different training on test, but be aware of this. That's what the view is. Let's go back. Publishing, right? And that's the URL we just showed above. But you could actually make it a custom URL, and also gives you the pre-created HTML should you want to put it in a website. Responses we'll go over also in a different training. This is going to be eventually where you will see all the different submissions. So when your member submits a payment or has a new membership application, you're going to see that in the responses. The other options down below, again, processing, right? If we wanted to make it archives that nobody was allowed to put any new responses, who can access, right? Who can access those responses? How long will the form be displayed for? So maybe you don't want to archive it, but you do want to have a very specific time on when it is available or when it's going to be closed. For instance, maybe for a school registration, you could come in and archive it, but for now you want to say, nope, we're just going to hold it off of these dates. There's a response clone, and it's an unavailable message. A few more options down here. Let's go over here. Notifications. So let's go to the page loads, right? The acknowledgement, right? Instead of that thank you message, or you could redirect to a different page. If you want to be sending out an automatic email, you have that option. And you can customize what you want that email to say and who is it from. Connectors, and there's going to be their own training on how to set these different areas up. There's also an area for collaboration and finally revisions. Let's go back to build. So I went through this far left-hand menu, and now I'm going to collapse it, right? My screen's relatively small, and so you have this option to give yourself a little bit more room. If I need it back again, I still have the icons here to refer to, but I can also bring it back out again. So now let's look at the column here on the left. By default, you're going to see the form outline. And if you look at this menu across the top, I have add content, themes, properties, and here's that outline again. But again, the outline will be displayed by default. I can get rid of it if I want to. Let's go ahead and talk about it. The outline is all of the fields in your form laid out easily, right? So rather than seeing it in the actual, the size, and this is kind of how they're shaped, you can just see it more, again, like an outline, right? So you can collapse these different sections and say, okay, you know what, I just want to see everything overall, to get a sense of how long the form is. And this can be really useful. Hold on, let's collapse them all. If you wanted to drag areas, maybe you realize, oh, you know what, I actually really want the tribute information below the payment information, right? You can easily grab that section and drag it down. And that would actually be easier than kind of grabbing, if you look over here, grabbing an entire section. Also possible, but a little bit easier. It also gives you kind of a quick overview, just thinking through what your form looks like. Likewise, you can grab individual fields within it. And so that can be really helpful. But one of the most important parts of the field outline is that, look, you have a quick reference for the TFA number. So if you look over here to the right, we have donor information, and then you see TFA underscore, and there's a number, right? And you see that for every single field has its own unique identifier. And this can become important both for your connectors and for conditionals. So right now, to store that away, if you wanted to see what your TFA was, you can see it right here, right? And we're going to come back to this number and when it becomes used. You also see, actually, very quickly, the required, which of these fields is required, right? So if you suddenly realize, oh, wait a minute, several more of these need to be required, you can easily kind of skip ahead to that. Let's go back to our menu up at the top. Add content. Let's click out of here for a second. Add content is what we're going to spend the main amount of time on today. So I'll come back to this one. Let's go over themes quickly. This allows you to change the look, right? You can grabs the ones that we have already available, right? So let's say what this coffee house does, right? And we've changed the look and the color. Right? And you can customize. You can take this and you can customize it. There's a few other options. Again, these are all just already created in here for your use, but you could create a new theme as well. So it's very specific to your site or to this particular event or donation form. And then we're back to the outline again. So let's get back to add content. I'm going to change my theme again. And then I click out of here. And now I'm back to just add content. So you'll notice first I have question, section, text or image, and predefined content. Majority of today's lesson is going to be on questions. Question you can think of as literally a field or a question that you were putting into the form and you are asking your member to give you an answer, to tell you something. Section, you can kind of see the sections that are on here where the donor information, and this helps visually, but also kind of helps thematically break up all the content of your form. Text and image, right? Of course, you're going to have labels for your different sections, like salutation or first name, but you may want addition. Maybe you want an explanation of your different funds you'd like people to donate to, or you want to tell people a little bit more about the synagogue or how school will be run, then you might want to use text, right? Or an image for more decoration. Predefined content, a little bit more complicated, but just essentially it's content that you have prior to the forms being created, you've defined. And maybe it's information that you're going to use over and over again. You know, you're going to want to put into forms over and over again. Let's go up to question. Text input is going to be any sort of free-floating text or numbers. So an easy answer is, first name. But text input could also be a field where you're asking for how much would you like to donate. Could also be input, right? Someone that's just writing up exactly what they want to tell you. A text input, if we look here, we have text input. All the ones that we're looking at right here, so first name, last name, is input, and we could say maybe Hebrew name, right? And it just allows people to, there would be writing freely in there. Text area, on the other hand, would be similar idea, but for a lot more space. If I drag this into here, I'm going to drop it, just drop it right underneath here. And I'm going to say, what's more about, you can imagine what this would be for. On a donation form, I don't know what else we'd have. We have someone write an essay on, but you can imagine this for school submissions or for member applications. Why would you like to join our synagogue? How did you hear about us? Tell us a little bit about your background, right? And that would be what that'd be used for. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to go back. Checkboxes, radio buttons, drop-down menus, and multi-select are all different ways of, rather than having someone just write in freely into the text area, you're pre-supplying them with options, right? And you're probably familiar with these. I'm just going to give you some examples. Check boxes, right? And quite literally, someone checks those boxes. Now, note that check boxes and the multi-select list, visually a little bit different, but functionally very similar. That would allow someone to say, oh, I want choice A and I want choice B. Same here, they could choose more than one option. It's going to be different than, say, radio buttons or the drop-down menu. Radio buttons. Radio buttons will only allow one of these options. So if you would only choose A or they choose B. If they chose B, then their option would be they would be moved from one of the other ones. Drop-down menu also here. Right. And so then we have the drop-down menu. And your options will always be preloaded with this ABC. But when you want to change them, and I'm going to show you this in a minute, you're going to go up to here. That's going to let you talk about those choices. So again, checkboxes, multi-select list allow you to choose multiple different options from a given list that you're providing. Radio buttons and drop-down menu will allow people to only select one. Finally, you have a hidden field. A hidden field, let me scroll down to one. Example here, right? This field is important. This is an authorized.net field. This is important because that's going to be transmitted to authorized.net. And so it's important that it's in your field, and it's going to be part of the field, the form processing, but it's not actually important that your members use it. In fact, if your member was to see the authorized.net subscription ID, that might be kind of confusing. Similar to the transaction IDs, right? These things are authorized.net token. It's important that they're in the form so that it can be processed correctly and coordinate then with Salesforce and with authorized.net. But it would confuse probably the average person to just see this and see a random sort of numbers. So it's been hidden. Password, someone would see, but it's going to hide the text. So if you see this, if I drop a password field in here, and I'm going to say, I'm going to call it password, but I'll explain in 1 minute. To a degree, this does not need to be a password that actually connects to a different system. The reason it's called password, I'm going to say done, and I'm showing a preview. Go to preview mode. Let me just demonstrate a few of these. So here's that text, right? Putting in text. Here is then, they have checkbox. It shows, yep, I want all of these. Similar, here is multi-select, and I could grab several options. As opposed to down here, where I would just say, I just want this, or the drop down, I just want this option. Now for my password, you can watch as I start to type it in, and you notice it's already encrypted, right? That's hidden from view. And that's what we mean by password, right? It's not actually connected to their Salesforce account or any other account yet necessarily, but it's hiding the information as it's being put in. So I'm gonna go back. That takes us through the different fields, right? The different kind of questions that we can use. Let's go over now. If I click onto a field, you'll notice that I have another menu pop up. Right? It's not there if I'm not clicking onto a field, but this is for the individual fields. And so now I have bold, italic, underline. These are kind of what you'd imagine for any. I want to make this particular label bold, or I want to italicize it, underline it. You can imagine image would drop an image in there if you wanted to. You also have an area you could just do outside of the label, but this would be specific to the label. Clear. These, bold, italic, underline, image, kind of link, all things you're familiar with. Clear those, extremely helpful, but may not be obvious at first. If you are copying and pasting from a Word document or from another form, it is likely that there is formatting, maybe visible or maybe invisible to you, and that can then come over. And so maybe this we copied and pasted Hebrew name from somewhere else, and let's say it was kind of like this. You realize, oh no, that's not what I want at all. And so I can clear it, and it takes away that formatting. And if it's formatting you've created, that's fine, but also this could really be useful again if you're copying and pasting from something else. Required, probably very clear, even if you've never created a form before, you fill out plenty in your life, where you may want to say, yes, we definitely want this. Hebrew name probably doesn't need to be required, but first name, last name, email, these are things we definitely need. I'm going to get to options, this big blue one. This is probably one of our most important topics for today. But before I get to that, let's just notice you can do copy. And if it copies, right, once you've done a copy, and then you can go add it into the form where you want to add it. Right. So I clicked it, dragged it, it came down, and now we have another one. But you know what? I actually don't need another one, so I'm going to delete that one. Here's our other copy, and I'm going to delete that as well. And finally, there's an option for, I'm going to delete this one as well, delete the password. There is the option for done. Just to let you know, we're done working on this field, and so now I'm off of that field. Let's go, though, back to field and look at options. Notice you'll see over here on that left-hand column, a number of different tabs opened up that we can open up to see what each of them reveals, right? Notice the options may be slightly different between different kinds of fields. Let's start here under options. And let's talk about validation rules. The first up, one validation we can add straight from here, and that's that required. You can make this required or not. Expected input format. So some things may be very, very clear, right? Like if someone see a first name field, they're probably unlikely to enter a time or a list of numbers. But there may be time when you really need to specify it. What kind of information you need from someone, such as if someone is inserting, let's go down here to where we have it, an amount, right? And if we click here and we saw the options, notice the expected input format for this one is a decimal number, right? Which means it's not going to then let us put in, write down 1, 2, 3, 4 in alphanumeric or put down someone's name. No, it's going to force the person to put in a number that's going to be have a monetary value, right? It makes sense. You have other options, and those are very clear options. Another one would be email, right? So we have our email field up here. And yep, it's already put in expected input format email, which means if someone put in text without an @ it would know, hey, emails have a certain format, and this is going to cause a problem because we really do want to make sure it's an actual valid email. And there's other options as well, right? There's calendar or date. So you can use those. You can limit the length of an answer. This can be incredibly helpful. Just know by default, form assembly is going to let you do whatever you'd like. So it's on you to know. If you know then that this is going to mean to go to your Salesforce database and create, say, a new record or update an existing record, then you want to make sure that the length of the answer in characters matches the same field character length in Salesforce, right? So for instance, let's say, I don't know, let's say you did 150 characters for a first name, but in Salesforce it was only 80, and someone submitted an incredibly long name, it would throw an error. And you would see this in your error log, which we'll talk about during testing, how you'd evaluate that. But that's what you want to be aware, that you can go into your Salesforce and see what is the length, right, of a particular field, and make sure that if you're using that field within your form assembly, you want to make sure those are connected. See one more. If I switch to here, just know I also have the option for custom. Right, I have all these different options. So back up here, expected import custom, and this would use a regex, right, when you kind of create what you expect to be. It's a little bit more complicated, but just know that it's an option if something comes up. Where we often use a custom one though is auto format with mask for a phone number. So we have a phone number filled in here. And when this can be useful, I don't think we do. This can be useful is something like this, exactly what you see here, right? Where it's going to then force that phone number up here. We do a phone number field. And notice here, auto format with mask, which means when someone is writing into it, let's see in our preview. That when we begin to write in that phone number, right, it's going to have it in the auto formatting on there. Great. So now back to our form. So that's validation. Next, we have, you can change your question type. So maybe you realize with keyword name, maybe you want to give people a list of options, right? You could always change your question type. Presentation. You'll see on this form, and I think most of our forms by default, the label, right, which is what we call this up here, is at the top, but it doesn't have to be, right? We could say below, on the left, right, right? Let me go back to this default. So you have that option to play with. You may have also noticed when I clicked on a given field, I can shrink or expand the size, right? Make that field. Now, notice this just increases the area for the field. And this is important that if you want to use it on a particular, make it take up less or more space in terms of the overall form, especially with your alignment. But you can also change the length of the field here, right? You could also, though, actually type in what you want, what the pixels are for a given field. Finally, you have this option to add text around a field. In these cases, it's not really, it doesn't really make sense to. If we go down here to, for instance, if someone is putting in that monetary amount, we might want to have here. So click on here and you see add text around field. What's the field that you're adding around the text? Well, you're adding that $, right? To make it clear, you're meant to put in the amount here, right? And that's going to be a dollar amount. Contextual hint, you can put in a hint, right? And then and to help people out with what they're going to put in. And with that, you could have a default position. Menu dependencies is a little bit more complicated. If we go back up here to our test, hang on. If we go up here to menu dependencies, you might have an option within within the more complicated putting in multiple answers. Default value. A default value would be helpful if you wanted to suggest, for instance, a donation of $18, right? For a multiple choice, you could say the default answer is maybe one of the choices. But you could also use this with a text field and then you would write it in. Repeatable options. We're not going to go through repeatables now, but this could be really useful if you realized you wanted to add multiple emergency contacts or multiple pickup people, right? And so then there would be the option to put in that field, and then someone could click to add that field again, right? And you could do this potentially with a section, right? List all the people who are going to pick up your children. Here's a name. Here's a phone number. Okay, now here's the next person, and that would be a repeatable option. Calculations. For none of these up here does it really make sense to do a calculation. So let's scroll down a little bit. Something like this. Frequency, right? Frequency has been listed as a calculation. This is a variable, and we've given it a variable name. Also, number of payments has also been marked as a variable. That variable has been given a name. Right? So when does it become useful? When we look at the total gift, then we've entered a calculation, right? So if someone has specified that they are going to be they'd like to make a reoccurring gift, then we need to take the values in the frequency and in the number of payments and add this all together then into the total gift. Right, which is what we're seeing here. Another option, if we looked at for instance, the fee, and then we have the total, right? So the fee then is going to take in what the gift, what the amount is, one of the variables up here. It's going to add in that fee, add in the fee to it. Access control. Access control, the difference between whether a field is hidden, which means it's not available at all to your member to edit. Edit, which is a default, right? That people you can choose or they can write in their answers, or no overwrite, which means it's probably a pre-filled option. So they can see it, they can see the pre-filled, but it's not allowing them to then accidentally put in, if they're filling out the form, their nickname or their cell phone number instead of their home phone number. That's access control. Sensitive data, right? Most of our data is not going to be sensitive in here, but there might be some. So for instance, like the credit card number down below, when we're taking that, or maybe even the bank routing number, we could say this is sensitive, right? We want to be more careful with that. And the form will note that and handle it differently. Autocomplete value, right? So you have these options here that are already pre-filled. So let's go back to a few of these more up here. So, two more things to go over, which is I mentioned, for text, you see you have bold, italic, all these different options here. For the label, then you have what the fields required, goes to options, which is in this left column, and copy. If though you had a multiple choice, notice now between required and options, we have an option for choices. This is how we're going to enter in all the different choices that are available. And again, by default, we're going to see this list of choice A. And so one of the easiest ones, you could just go in here and say, you could write over it. You have other options. You could also just type it directly into here, right? And just in this, perhaps obviously you could copy and paste. You have a very long list, and each card return is going to be, right, a new option above. We keep adding all those options. If you realize you don't want an option, then you can just get rid of it. And notice I mentioned at the beginning that unique identifier, you can see it appear here, right? All those different options. If you need to refer to that later, okay, great, here's that number. Choices, okay. And this would work then for all the different ways of doing multiple choice. Let's also go back to conditional. So right now, there's no conditionals. But let's say for this one, the radio, we're gonna look at those options and we're gonna say the radio options are, let's get rid of their default ones. We'll say soup, salad, other, and save those choices, right? And now let's say if someone chooses other, we want them to write in what that answer is. So I'm gonna grab a question here, text field. Now this one, if, we're gonna say if other, please explain. Please explain. Now, great, this is here. And now I wanna go in and I'm gonna say condition rules, edit. So start. And say we see this if someone chooses one other. For here, right? And we want it to correspond to this one. So I want to actually put it, make sure this is correct and just say, choose your meal. Meal, right? Where I'm going for this, TFA 836. I'm double checking to make sure this is the correct other, because sometimes there can be more than one other. Choose your meal, right? It's connected with that one. Great. And now you notice it's got this tag that says, hey, it's conditional. I'm gonna flag this as conditional. I'm gonna save this. We can preview it, and so you'll notice only when we do here do we see if other, please explain. And the menu dependencies can work similar to the conditionals, where it's a little bit more complicated. We are showing them the options in the within a given spectrum. Like what they choose then is showing them additional menu options.